Hello, everyone. How are you? This is Virginia Stanley from HarperCollins Publishers. This is the Library Love Fest team coming to you remotely from our various ports in the storm. And this very strange time, we hope that you are all safe and well. We are, and we're happy to be connecting with you to talk about books. So we're just starting this new thing, Zoom. You can see us all here on Zoom, and we're doing this new little series called Door to Door. So we're going from our door to your door, where we hope you are safe and well. And we will be bringing books and author talks and chats and buzzes and various things on a pretty consistent basis week to week. So again, I'm Virginia Stanley. Chris?
Hi there. This is Chris Connolly coming to you live from the Tiki Hut, keeping the spirit alive. So good to see all of you.
Lainey?
Hi, it's Lainey. Good to see everybody.
Yes, so good to see everybody. So we have a very special guest, two guests in our virtual Tiki Hut in our inaugural episode of Door to Door. So first I'd like to introduce to you Sharon Rosenblum, who is the Senior Director of Publicity at the William Morrow Group. And Sharon has worked with our esteemed author, we'll get to one second, Don Winslow, on the publication of The Border and The Force, and his new brand new book, Broken. So Sharon has joined us to contribute to the conversation. And before we get to Mr. Winslow, we want to remind you all to please ask questions. We would love to hear from you. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So please feel free to ask any questions. Lainey will keep an eye on them and ask them throughout our chat with Mr. Winslow. Don Winslow, New York Times best-selling author, Library Journal review came in today for Broken. This is a collection of crime novellas. Some of them are loosely connected, and Library Journal raves. Fans will eat up these neat, taut, action-packed stories. So we are thrilled to have you here, Don Winslow. Thank you so much for taking time out of this crazy time to talk to librarians about your book and anything else you want to impart to them. So I will hand it over to you, and we will get going. So Don Winslow, thank you so much.
Oh, thanks so much for having me here. I really appreciate it. And I'm so happy to be talking to librarians because libraries have meant so much in my life. It is not at all an exaggeration to say that without libraries, I would not be a writer. It is literally true. My mother was a librarian. And I was basically raised in a tiny little library, stone building from the 1800s in the tiny New England village of Matunic, Rhode Island. And this place, I remember as a kid being able to go in there. And I soon discovered that just wandering the aisles of that small building in the middle of nowhere, little fishing town, I could go anywhere in the world, just by pulling a book off that shelf and sitting down with it. And then later, I discovered that not only could I travel in space in that little room, I could travel in time. Not only could I go to England now, I could go to England in 1066. I could go to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania in 1863. I could go to Africa at any point in time, which was so inspiring and led to so many dreams and so much travel that I did. And I really became a writer. My sister, it's funny, there are two kids in our family, both became professional novelists. And I think a lot of that had to do with what we call dial-a-book. If we couldn't go to the library on any given day, we'd call my mom up and say, could you bring home, title X, Y, or Z? And I played hockey in high school and got hurt a lot. And we used to measure the injuries by the number of books I ordered from my mom from the library. If it was like a sprain or something, that's a 1-book injury. When I broke a couple of bones in my back, that was multi-volume, let's go to the Will and Ariel Durant's History of the World. So I owe so much to libraries. Another thing I'd like to say about that, is it okay if I go on a bit?
Please do.
Sometimes I think forget what a revolutionary idea the public lending library was. And I think that you can look at the rise of modern democracy and chart it just parallel with the rise of public lending libraries. Because think about this, prior to that moment in time, information and knowledge were the province of the rich and the powerful. No one else had access to it. And then we get the rise of the public lending library. Everybody has access to knowledge and information. They can go in and look at the newspapers and the magazines. They can go in and read history. They can go in and read the great novelists and the great artists that heretofore were inaccessible. So I think that when we look at the history of democracy, we need also to be looking at the history of libraries and what a tremendous contribution they have been and that they continue to be. And while I'm preaching, so I had a little too much coffee today. Days start early around here. Can I tell you a story about another library in particular?
Yes.
Yeah, I live in another small town, albeit on the other coast. I live in Southern California, quite close to the Mexican border, in a very rural area. For instance, our school district encompasses something like 625 square miles, most of it wilderness. We have about 3,000 population in that area. And back around 2000, we decided that the community had to have a real library. We don't have a town government, we're unincorporated. And so a bunch of people formed something called Friends of the Library. And we started to raise money to build the library. It was, bake sales and raffles. And I did readings, people would buy tickets too. And we got some county funding. And it took a while, along about 2003, construction started on our joint use library for the town and for the school. But also in the autumn, the October of 2003, we had a catastrophic wildfire that in the course of 72 hours destroyed a third of our homes, 770,000 acres. We lost lives. It was a hard time. And we thought the fire was bad. The economic fallout that came from the fire was worse. We're basically a tourist town and all of that stopped. It's funny, the fire was stopped across a 2-lane road from the library construction site. The volunteer firemen lined up in that road. It was sort of the last stand before that fire came right into our town. And they stopped it there, and it started to rain. And then it started to snow. And we had a rough time. We had no running water. We had no power. Food distribution was tough, but we struggled through. I will never forget, though, the following spring, the library was completed. It was the first sign of life that we'd had in that town for a long, long time. Everything was charred, everything was black. You smelled it all the time. But that library rose. And still there, and very much for the scattered community, the heartbeat of our town. It's the one public gathering place that we have. It's the one place that kids, if they have after school activities, they go to the library to study and get on computers and read books, kill that time. It's where we have artistic events and readings and things like that. And so that library for me and for the people of this town is a symbol of our community and of our rebirth and our survival. And so that library means more than just a building to me. So I'm delighted to be here today. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for letting me thank a lot of librarians for what you all do. It means a lot. Thank you.
That's an incredible story, and it's very heartwarming and heartfelt, and I think especially these times that we're in right now, it feels very close to the heart. But thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Sharon, do you want to take over a little bit and talk with Don about the new book and where you're at?
Stuff.
Very exciting.
Anyway, hi everybody. It's great to be part of this inaugural door to door, and to also be part of this extraordinary publication. Broken, which is Don's new book, will be out on April 7th. And it is a collection of novellas, original novellas. Though there are some characters that come from some previous books. So Don, I thought you might want to tell us a little bit about how you came to this process. You're coming off of over 20 years being dedicated to the Cartel trilogy. And in the middle of that, you also published The Force, a standalone novel taking place in New York City. So I'll turn it over to you to answer that, and then I'll come back.
Thanks, Sharon. You've been around for a lot of this. So you've lugged some of my heavy books, around. You and I get out of cars in and out all over the country. Yeah, as you alluded to, I spent 22 years of my life on the story of the war on drugs as pertained to Mexico, which was a heavy topic, and I'm very glad that I did it. But those were marathons, or ultra marathons. That was the loneliness of the long distance runner, to quote Alan Sillitoe. And I felt like I wanted to do something to torture the metaphor in the middle distances. I had stories in mind that were not epics. They were not the weight of the cartel and the border. They didn't span decades and continents. So they were in a single location over the course of days, and yet are substantive tales. They felt too substantive to be short stories. I didn't want to sprint, but I wanted something that was in that kind of middle range, that middle distance. And so the novella felt right to me, although I'd never done one before. So it was strange territory.
Well, they read rapid fire, and there's a sensibility that you are getting into the heart of a story, but you're allowing the reader to kind of run this pace with you. What was it like to make this transition? You were saying this is the first time you've done novellas. So what did you learn from the experience?
That it's really hard. It's a demanding, because it is not quite fish in a fowl. I've read a lot of them, Stephen King, Jim Harrison, and other people who've done it very, very well. It required a combination of efficiency and leisure that was very strange. There were times when I'd really get moving, in that rapid fire pace you kindly alluded to. But then I thought, you know what, I have a few pages to play with. I can go on a couple little diversions. I can be maybe a little funnier than I've been in some of the other books. I mean, 2 or 3 of these stories are quite serious, and 3 of them are much, much lighter. So it was a lot of fun to do. It was fun to bring back some of these old characters that people always ask me about when I'm out on tour. I always hear, whatever happened to Neil Carey? Are you going to write another Boone? And I don't want to give away too many surprises here, but I think that people who've been kind enough to read me for a while are going to have some fun surprises in these.
When you mention the humor or funny, it's really, it's it's an incredible journey to go with you on, to be so humorous within these stories. And I hope you'll read what I'd love you to do is to read a little bit of the third story, the San Diego Zoo. And that'll sort of explain what I'm trying to say, that there's some real humor here. And this way we can talk a little bit also about the syntax that you're using and getting right into the heart.
You want me to do that now?
Yeah, please, please. So Don's going to read from the third novella, San Diego Zoo.
I'm not going to read for very long, folks. Don't worry. I'm assuming you can read. And I hate being read to, but we'll do a little bit of this. This is called the San Diego Zoo. No one knows how the chimp got the revolver, only that it's a problem. Chris Shea didn't think it was his problem, though, when the call first came over the radio that a chimpanzee had escaped from the world-famous San Diego Zoo. Call animal control, he responded, not considering runaway monkeys to be a police matter. Then the dispatcher added, the chimp appears to be armed. Armed, Chris asked, with what, like a stick? He'd seen something on Animal Planet about chimps using sticks as tools or weapons, which apparently was significant for some reason Chris missed because he got up to make a sandwich. Or maybe it was baboons, or maybe it was the National Geographic Channel. Witnesses are reporting that the chimp is carrying a pistol, the dispatcher said. Well, Chris hadn't seen that on Animal Planet. What kind of a pistol? A revolver. Well, that's a break anyway, Chris thought. It could be worse, a Glock or a Sig Sauer. Where's the chimp now? The dispatcher cannot get off the track of cop speak. Suspect was last seen heading east on the Prado, which is not a break. The central walkway of Balboa Park is squarely within Chris's zone and Central Division, and he has to respond. It's also bad news because on a hot July night, a lot of people will be strolling in the park, including a lot of tourists. And the last thing the chief or the mayor wants is a CNN headline about a visitor to America's finest city getting gunned down by a chimpanzee. Responding, Chris said, and rolled into the park. Now he's standing beside 5 other cops watching the chimp climb up the wall of the Museum of Man. That's what I need tonight, Chris thinks, a chimp with a firearm and a sense of irony. Thank you.
Right. It's great. You had mentioned to me that you had that first line.
Yeah.
Where did that come up from?
No idea, and I don't want to know. I mean, I wouldn't go into my head without a flashlight and a gun. You know what I mean? Sure. This line just kept repeating itself to me over the course of quite a few months. No one knows how the chimp got the chimpanzee. And then finally I thought, well, okay, what about it? This is how a lot of stories begin. You play that great writer's game, what if? Okay, how did the chimp get the chimpanzee? Who's responding to this issue? What happens? And then I don't know how these things evolve, but all of a sudden I had this young, nice, ambitious cop having to respond to this call, and it just kind of went from there.
Yeah,
And
well, it's
how the chimp got the chimpanzee.
it's a great example of the humor and you bring to the story and the human characters too, as you see when you finish reading. Well, Lainey has something to say.
Yeah, there's a lot of love. I mean, obviously for you in the book, and they're so excited that we're doing this because they just love to hear. But speaking of, a little behind the scenes of the writing, they want to know, like, is this your writing nook? Is this where you do a lot of the writing?
This is where I do most of my writing. I'm on the computer now, so I can't walk you around. If I was on the phone, I would. This is an old gas station, and it's a minute from our house up a dirt road. It's on an old 2-lane blacktop. It was a gas station back in the 40s that my wife and I took over. She has the larger part of it for an art studio, and I rarely go in there, rarely am invited. And then I have what was the office of the gas station. So yeah, this is where I do most of my stuff.
Awesome. One more question before I throw it back to Sharon from our our good friend Katie Stover. She wants to know, do you like, let me get back to it. Do you like reading a lot of gritty crime fiction from other authors, and maybe another author that you've read, enjoyed, that would surprise us?
Ooh, I absolutely do. Now, I hasten to add that probably 95% of my reading is research reading, that it really is stuff, is work-related stuff. Uh, I hesitate sometimes to give these lists because I'm always afraid of leaving somebody out, you know? So I think that our genre is very, very strong. I think that there are just terrific women and men out there writing terrific stuff. Most recently in the genre that I was rereading, Raymond Chandler. In terms of surprises, I think people might be surprised to know that I read a lot of Shakespeare, and for several years made my living directing Shakespeare plays.
Wow, that's awesome.
And Don, we did have a request to see the jacket of the book. Do you mind holding the book up?
Oh, I should do that, huh? There it is. Is that good? Can you see it okay?
Beautiful.
That is beautiful.
It's a nice cover, isn't it?
Do you like it?
I love it. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So,
Wow. Yes, go on. Did you want to say something else?
oh, I'm just waiting on y'all.
Well,
I'm doing for time here, so.
I think, this was so wonderful to have you here. And as Lainey is saying, she can just see all the love, so many fans of your books, and so excited about this new one, Don. And it's such an interesting thing to have Sharon here to talk a little bit about, people don't typically get that sort of, that unique relationship that you share. So Sharon, that's really wonderful that you were able to be part of this. But Don, I just want to thank you so much for sharing your love of libraries and part of the voice, that wonderful, funny voice that's in this book, which is just so unique and so wonderful. And we want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to librarians. Is there anything that you want to say before we sort of wrap up? And feel free, we're here, but
Big thank you. And just sort of a note, that we always often think of writers as writing books alone. And to a certain extent, that's true, but to a larger extent, it's not. Without librarians giving me books, without teachers teaching me how to read the things, without people like you and Sharon and everybody else, and librarians and booksellers, and especially readers, we're in it together. So they say that we write books alone. It's not really true. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it. This has been great fun. Thank you.
thank you, Don. Broken is available, goes on sale April 7th. But of course, so many librarians have already read it and shared their love with us for the book. So we wish you well. We wish you all good health, and we will be back again with another edition of Door to Door, bringing books and authors to librarians from far-flung places. But as long as we're all safe and healthy, that's all we care about. Sharon, Don, thank you so much. Chris and Lainey, we will all be together again one day soon. And until then, we'll be coming to you virtually from a remote tiki hut. Take good care. Thanks, Don.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
Bye.